So we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. I know that diversity and inclusion has certainly been an emphasis of not only the International Board, but our organization as a whole over the past few months. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to bring in an outside speaker. We're lucky to have Stacie Colston-Patterson with us today to present and provide perspective and also some areas that we can, stay supportive of one another. Stacie?
Hi, can I get a clapping reaction if you guys can hear me well? No, you're oh, yay, good job. Thank you. I appreciate that. So that's just a great example of how we're gonna have to work together in this virtual environment. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we're gonna get started. Okay. So I'm really excited to be here today. We are going to talk a little bit about inclusive leadership, particularly for you all as you have a heart for service, right? That's what this organization is about. And so we're going to dive right in and I'm going to do a little bit of introduction of myself and then we'll move on from there. So who am I? My name is Stacie Colston-Patterson and I am a lawyer who does not practice traditionally. I am someone who is passionate about helping and serving youth and young people in our world and helping you all be able to create the world that you want to have. I will tell you that you were looking at two pictures of me. One is of myself and my family. So I identify as a Black woman. I have a Black husband and I chose to have two Black children. And this is a picture of us from the summer. And I picked it because this is probably as relaxed as any of us have been in the past, 9 or so months. And so it was a good representation of kind of one of the highlights that I've had since everything has kind of happened in the world of COVID for us. And then the other picture I selected is actually a picture of me crying in my car, right? So wanted to show you both sides of who I am. That it's not always these bright and sunny and amazing times where I'm super relaxed, but sometimes there are just moments where things feel very overwhelming. And that is a moment where I was driving and I was headed to go to a meeting and I just felt overwhelmed and I pulled over and I had myself a little cry. And I just think it's important for us to remind ourselves that we are more than one thing, right? We are more than one emotion. We are more than one way to present ourselves to the world. And so that is a little snippet of me. So I see someone's in the chat and I'm likely going to not read many of those until we get to the question section, just so you guys know. So I want to prepare you all for the next picture because the next picture of me is it's me when I was 17 and in Key Club. That's right. That's Stacie. That is Stacie Victoria Camille Colston at 17. That is me when I was the chair of our zoo trip for Elkhart Central High School in Indiana's Key Club. And look at her. She has her pointe shoes on. She's like ready to take on the world of ballet. I don't know. I'm not really sure what I was thinking there, but I want you all to know that I've been where you are. The world looked a little different, right? My world did not consist of smartphones and the ability to get in touch with anyone at any time and see myriad amounts of information at any time. But I was once where you are. I was once a person who was younger and was really thoughtful and wanted to change the world and wanted to be involved in service and had that servant's heart at that same age. So before we dive right in, I want to start by acknowledging my privilege. And so I know that Key Club is an international organization. And so I want to start by saying that I'm a born citizen of the United States of America. I acknowledge that privilege. English is my first language. I am a cisgendered woman. So I identify with the gender that was assigned to me at birth, the sex that was assigned to me at birth. I have been able to participate in public and private formal education. I've had the opportunity in my life to travel internationally, and I do have a professional degree. And so for me, it's important that I take a moment to acknowledge that those are my privileges that I carry with me as we walk into this conversation. So I do want to take a quick moment in the chat to just have you all identify one privilege that you all know that you walk with every day in your life. So if everyone can just throw one in there, that would be great. And I am looking at the chat now because I asked you to participate in it. Nice, thank you. Thank you. I see I'm white passing. I'm white and straight. I'm white, born in Canada, healthy. English is your first language, college educated. I love this. Thank you. From the Bahamas, born in America, white and educated, education. This is fantastic, you guys. Thank you for sharing that. It's not always easy for us to have to sit down and pull at our individual privileges, but I think it's really important to start by acknowledging those things. And so I want you all to kind of think through the way that I've tried to structure this conversation as a way that you can try to think about structuring conversations that you are having, meetings that you are having, things of that nature in your role in your leadership positions moving forward. And so sometimes it's important to start by saying, I know that these are places where I'm going to have more privilege than other people. Excuse me, there are also identities about me, characteristics about me that do not provide me privilege, right? Like I am a Black woman in America. So there's a lot going on there that does not provide me privilege. I'm the mother of a Black son. There's really just a whole lot of oppression happening in that statement, right? So it's acknowledging where we are coming from, that there are ways that we may be marginalized or disenfranchised, but we also know that there are places where we have privilege as well. Okay, so let's start a little bit with our rules of engagement. You guys have already done one of those things, and that is honesty. So I like to sort of have a conversation starting with what are our expectations? So today, our expectations are that we are honest with each other, that we have an open mind, that we open our hearts to the information and to the feelings that we may be feeling, that we use care and concern in communicating with each other and speaking about ideas and even calling each other out if that is necessary. And that because we're on Zoom and because I'm sharing my screen, there's only so many of you that I can see at any given time. And so I want this to be as interactive as it can possibly be. So if you will notice on your Zoom, there's like a little section that says reactions at the bottom. You'll see them. They're like little emojis that you can share. Just if I'm asking you a question and you want to speak, if you could kind of there's like a thumbs up little guy, if you can put the thumbs up there, and I will quickly kind of scroll through people, and we'll try to pick people at random to help be sure that we are able to have everyone participate in what we're doing today. Or as many of you who want to participate verbally in that way, orally in that way. But really just my main objectives are that we come to this with an open heart and an open mind, and that we recognize that we are all very different, but that we have some things in common as well. Okay, so who are you? So this is who you say you are, right? I pulled this straight from the Key Club website. So you are student-led, you are high school, secondary school, upper school students, right? You are a membership organization. So you are an organization that is full of people who said, I want to be a part of this. You're really focused on the world. That's a big word, right? It's a huge scope. You're focused on making the world a better place through service. So you are committed to being individuals. You are all individual humans with your own particular uniqueness who have come together. You are leaders who answered a call. So I don't know about you all, but whenever I get a phone call and I don't know who it's from, if there's not someone that shows up that I see, I don't answer it, right? That's a choice. I made a choice not to answer the phone, or I make a choice to answer it. So you all are making a choice to answer a call to lead. That you are people who are rooted in courage and that you have a heart for service. And so when I look at this, these highlighted words were the things that I thought really stood out for me in wanting to move through this conversation, right? So we're talking about high school. I mean, gosh, I don't know about every one of you, but like that sweet little 17-year-old in that picture I showed you, like truly had no idea what she was going to be facing in the rest of the world, absolutely felt devoted and loyal and passionate about changing it. And so that is such an important time in your life where you guys get to stretch a little bit, you get to challenge yourselves. Many of you have the love and support of families or loved ones that are there to help you if you fall a little bit on that flight. And it's that time right before you kind of go out into the world on your own, right? So it's this interesting mix of still kind of being in that childhood phase of your life, because you're technically still children, many of you, right? But also really almost being adults, really almost being out there in the world on your own. I love that we talk about being individuals, that we're talking about a choice to be members here, that we're answering a call, and that we're willing to be courageous. And so all of those things come together for you all when you're talking about how you use that servant heart, how you use your heart to serve others. So we're going to do a really basic and quick diversity, equity, and inclusion definition section here. And so we're going to start with diversity, right? So this is a condition of having or being composed of differing elements. It's the inclusion of different types of people, such as people of different races or cultures, in a group or organization. I think it's incredibly interesting that the definition of diversity includes the word inclusion, right? Kind of an interesting way to describe that, because I would say that the way we talk about diversity and inclusion are two very separate things. But when you're looking at that Merriam-Webster definition, it's very clear that they're including that word inclusion into the definition of diversity. And we're gonna talk a little bit about equity. So equity is justice according to natural law or right. It's a freedom from bias or favoritism. All right. Inclusion is the act or practice, I want us to really focus in on practice here, of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded. So as because of their race, gender, sexuality, or ability. So when we look at these phrases, are you all feeling like comfortable with those? Do those feel like definitions that you all are familiar with? Nothing seems out of like the norm there. I can get head nods, that works too. Yes, you're comfortable with them, or no, you are not. Got some thumbs up. Yay for the thumbs up. Love it. Thank you guys for using that. Super helpful. Does anyone want to add anything to these definitions? And if you do, just go ahead and unmute yourself and sing out, Louise. Everyone feels good with them? Well, okay. We are going to talk specifically. Okay, I see this. We need equity to achieve equality. Yep, that's great. Absolutely. I think I definitely think there's a whole other like 45 minutes we could spend on the difference between equity and equality, right? Like those are two very different words that have two very different meanings. But you're absolutely right. I see that, and I'm here for that. Awesome. All right, so we're going to talk very specifically about inclusion. So we talked about this dictionary definition of inclusion, and if you go out and you just like Google image the word inclusion, like this is some of the pictures that you get, which I'm not going to lie, this picture of all the hands touching gave me a little like, ooh, that was in the before times. Like we definitely aren't doing that in the current COVID times. But when you see these pictures, when you think about the word inclusion, what does it feel like to you? What is that? What is inclusion? What does it feel like? Anyone have any thoughts on what that feels like? Put it in the chat. Belonging. Thank you. Everyone participates. Thank you. Someone likes the image on the far left. Thank you. Include, respect, unity, a sense of safety. Everyone. Awesome. These are great responses. Breaking down barriers. Everyone belongs. Unity. Awesome. Acceptance, safe space, everyone working together, all welcome. Oh, I love it. I love it. You guys, this is amazing. You are writing this presentation for me. I love it. Just so you know, we're going to talk about so many of the things that you just brought out in your comments. Yeah, I'm drawn a lot to, I think, the image on the left as well. There's something about it that feels a little bit more genuine to me than potentially the other two. And so I really appreciate that. I'm also seeing some acceptance, empathy, growing past tolerance. Being yourself is encouraged. Those are all amazing responses. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. So I think it's interesting, right? Inclusion can look and be many different things. And so we're going to spend a little bit of the time today really sort of diving into that, and then also talking about what you all can do as leaders to lead inclusively. Okay, so this is sort of my definition of inclusion. Inclusion is belonging plus valued uniqueness, right? So I think of it as two things that come together to create a sense of inclusion, or a climate or a culture of inclusion, is that people need to feel like they belong, and they need to feel like their uniqueness is valued. So we're going to start by talking about belonging. So let's look at belonging. Belonging. Here's what it's not. It's not assimilation. And I think often people feel in order to belong, they need to act like, look like, and be like sort of the majority of the people, right? Or the people in power. And that is something that I think when I see comments like growing beyond tolerance, I think of tolerance and assimilation as being very connected. They're very side by side, right? If people who are considered the others, if people who are traditionally marginalized, traditionally oppressed, are constantly trying to assimilate to be like the people who are in power, then we're really just tolerating the others, right? We're just tolerating the people who we are willing to oppress as those that are in power. We're not actually accepting them as who they are. And so I think it's really important to sort of start by talking about that, what it's not. It's not that. It is not, oh, didn't mean to go forward. It is not this idea of assimilating. And here's what inclusion also is. It's not exclusive. And belonging is not exclusive, right? So you all belong to Key Club, right? You belong to this organization, but it is not at the exclusion of any other part of your life, or not at the exclusion of any other human being that you may interact, right? So you can feel a sense of belonging because you have some similarities with a person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are excluding others because you belong to one group. And I think that's a really important distinction for us to think about too. We are not better, worse, smarter, stronger, faster, more empathetic, more caring, or more successful necessarily because we're a part of group A. It doesn't make us better or worse than the people who are part of group B, right? So we have to really be thoughtful about this idea of creating a sense of belonging, but not creating a sense of exclusion at the same time. That's a hard line to sort of walk, but I think it's one that we can all learn to walk together. Okay, so what is it? It is looking at the things that we have in common. So let's start by looking at our similarities. What is one major similarity that everyone that is here right now has? There's one thing that you all definitely have in common. And what is that? You can throw it in the chat. Key Club, correct. You're all humans, you're all in Key Club, you're all humans, you're all in Key Club, right? You all made a specific choice to be members of an organization that held specific values that you obviously felt drawn to, right? And if you didn't feel drawn to those specific values, or you didn't value those things, if your values didn't align with Key Club's values, you would no longer be a member. Is that fair to say? I'll take head nods for yeses. Yeah, right. And there are a lot of inherent communities that we may belong to that work that way. So for example, I may not necessarily enjoy every single aspect of my extended family. It may not be my jam all the time. I may not particularly love it all the time, but I don't really have a choice in who those people are. I didn't get to choose that group of people. Those people were chosen for me. I was born into, or adopted into, or brought into that group. And so you don't really get a lot of say there. I have a lot of choice in how I interact with them. I have choice in the boundaries that I set with them. But I don't necessarily have the choice in like who those people are. So I think it's important to be thinking about that too, that you guys have made a choice to be a part of this group, to choose to belong to this group, and to choose to make this group one where others feel safe enough to come to the group as their authentic selves as well. So that's really looking at that similar piece. And acceptance. So this growing beyond tolerance is so important. And I'm so excited to see that people wrote that in the chat box, because that's right. Tolerance and acceptance are two very different things, right? Tolerance is like, ugh, I guess this person can be around. I'll deal with them. It'll be okay for them to be here. Accepting is saying, I understand that this is a person that I don't necessarily agree with, or that I may not be necessarily drawn to naturally as someone that I would communicate with or want to spend time with, but I am going to accept them for who they are today. And I'm going to treat them as an equal in that way. And belonging requires all of us to release our judgments. And that self-judgment, that is judgment about others, but it requires us to take a moment to say, okay, the thought that I just had may not have been one that was rooted in believing the best in this person, or wanting the best for this person, or allowing grace for each of us to grow in our thoughts and ideas. And so I think that is incredibly important. Okay, so I'm looking and I see that there's a question, so let's stop and answer. It says, so I have a question. As a Christian, I don't target, oppress, or impose my beliefs on homosexuality, but I recognize the act as a sin. I have been taught to show tolerance, but my religion has defined it as disagreeing but accepting that they have their own right to be here. So is that considered tolerance or acceptance, or perhaps it's in the middle? I think this is an amazing question. Gosh, okay, let's talk about it. Who thinks that we can, let's sort of like, this is what I call a workshop question, right? So I would say that this is really hard because religion is incredibly personal. And I think that it is one of the things that can define a person in their lifetime, whether that is at a young age, or whether that is in their middle age, or whether that is later in their life. So I don't know that I can tell you personally if you are tolerating someone or accepting someone, or if it's somewhere in the middle. That is not something that I can say for you, because I don't know what's in your mind and in your heart and in your feelings. And I also want to state that I think that a blanket statement of like, as a Christian, is also kind of exclusive in itself, right? Because I think that there are Christians who may not have the exact same beliefs that you have when it comes to sexuality, and people who identify as different sexualities. So I think it's really a matter of some self-reflection and deciding if this is something something that you personally are you living in a world of tolerance? Are you living in a world of acceptance? Are you recognizing the acts that may be associated with that sexuality as a sin? I think this kind of runs the gamut, right? So it's sort of the same concept of like, if you can continue to live your life in a way that you feel like you are holding everyone out in the same regard, that you are treating everyone equally, that you have an ability to see someone and to see the good in them, to see them and give them grace, regardless of their sexuality or any other characteristic, then I would say that you probably are really moving towards acceptance and less to tolerance. However, if that's not necessarily where you are, and that's okay if you're not, then I think that, you may want to be working a little bit towards moving towards acceptance as opposed to tolerance, but definitely allowing yourself the grace to move and grow, and challenge yourself, and challenge the way that you treat others, and challenge those ideas. And so I do see someone really particularly pointing out the golden rule, which I did not put this in this presentation, but I'm gonna challenge you all, since you're using this concept of the golden rule, which is treat others as you want to be treated. And I'm gonna challenge you to use something that we call the platinum rule. And so you can Google this. It's not a phrase I coined, but it is this concept of, you don't just treat people the way you want to be treated, you treat people the way they want to be treated, right? So our golden rule is we treat everyone the way we want to be treated, and your platinum rule is you treat people the way they want to be treated. And so just wanting to kind of put that out there too. So the way I want to be treated and spoken to today may not be the same way that you want to be treated and spoken to today. And that's really important. So thanks, that was nice. That was good to kind of have a little bit of a discussion, even though it's hard for us to really have a discussion um, throughout the belonging phase. All right, we're gonna move on because we have limited amounts of time. And we're going to talk a little bit about uniqueness. And here's the thing about uniqueness. This one's pretty easy. Here's what's great about you all. You're all individuals. And in fact, you make a point to say that in your beliefs, in your values, that you are all individual humans. Everyone is different. You are located around the world. That is something that makes each of you unique. You are located in different places in different countries in the world, right? You come from different cultures. You have different customs. You believe in different religions, or you don't believe in any specific religion. And we all likely have different sort of first languages or preferred languages that we speak, right? And so all of those things are a part of what make you unique. Every single day that you live your life, every experience that you have, every moment that you've been able to reflect on, every meal that you eat, all of those things are what make you an individual, that change your perspective, that bring you to a conversation in a way that only you can come to that conversation. And so when we think about this concept of belonging and uniqueness, it's not that we just are individuals, but it's that we are valuing each individual for their uniqueness. And so it's needing to put those two things together. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can do that. Okay, so we just sort of started to touch on this. So as a leader, you have to balance a couple of things when you're talking about being an inclusive leader. You have to balance your organization's priorities, right? So if we want to translate this to the concept of a business, it's like you've got to be able to look at the business processes and the business purposes of what's happening. So what are the priorities? What's the priority of your club? What's the priority of Key Club International? What's the priority of you personally in your leadership role? You know, did you have 3 or 4 things that you wanted to accomplish personally in your role? So you have to start by looking at that. What are your organizational priorities? And then the next is that you have to try to create and cultivate understanding and empathy, right? So part of feeling that sense of belonging, having that feeling, is that we're creating a space of what we call psychological safety. And psychological safety is a place where that's really hard to create. You can do it and everyone can do it. And that is, it's a place where people can come and know that they can be themselves and they're not going to be judged, shunned, or they're not going to be passed over for opportunities because of that. And so we want to make sure that to do that, to create that psychological safety, is really trying to have those conversations about understanding and about empathy. So how do we build that muscle? My husband is a former empathy and anti-bullying educator, and he talks a lot about how empathy is actually a muscle. It's not, he'll be like, well, some people just don't have it. And that's not true necessarily. It's something you just have to practice. So it's something that you continue to practice over and over and over again. And I think that that's really important. Okay, I just want to make a quick comment because I can see some things happening in the chat, and I completely appreciate everything that you all are doing, but I want to circle back to this comment that I made in the beginning, and that we were going to use care and concern and how we speak to each other. And so I want everyone to be able to express their opinions, but I also want you all to be thoughtful that we are reading your words and we can't hear your words. So please be mindful that even though what you, from your heart, your intention may feel incredibly positive and caring and full of concern, just be thoughtful about the way that someone may be able to read those words where it feels a little bit different than that. The third thing that you have to balance as a leader is you have to recognize that diverse backgrounds and perspectives are an important source of insight that make your organization successful. You are having to acknowledge that it is important. You are making a point to say, this is important to us, that we are only successful because we have the ability to collaborate and to bring together different perspectives. And we can either be more successful than we are now, or we can stay stagnant. And you can make that choice. You can decide if you want to stay exactly where you are, or if you want to grow and be better than you were before. So how do you do those things? How do you balance all of that? How do you lead inclusively? Well, it's really 4 steps. You're going to have to articulate, role model, assess, and reinforce. And so we'll talk individually about those 4 things and how you all can kind of take that in as leaders and be able to move forward. So articulate, this is purely words. And this is the section that I would say is very much you're like, here are the things that you can write down and be like, this is what you would actively do, right? So here are your takeaways. Words, you want to communicate plainly in a way that most of your members will understand. So that goes back a little bit to that platinum rule. You don't just want to communicate with people the way that you want to be communicated with. You need to communicate with people the way they want to be communicated with, the way they will best receive your information. So whether that means you are creating videos with subtitles, are you creating documents in different languages? Are you making a point to present information in many different ways? But you need to decide what that is going to look like. And then you want to make sure that you have the ability to really take that and communicate it back out to the membership in a way that makes sense, that they can understand, and that they can also get on board with. You want to come up with what I call rules of engagement. So rules of engagement are very simple. These are the expectations that we have of each other when we have conversations that may be really hard, and we're going to follow those rules. We're going to make sure that we all agree on what those look like. We're going to talk about how we resolve conflict. We're going to talk about what happens when we don't get along or when we disagree, and we're going to talk about how we move forward. And that may mean, you know what? We disagree on something right now. There's a way, we have two paths we can go. And the group doesn't agree on which path we're going to take, and that's okay. And so you may decide that is a discussion that you're willing to have once, twice, 3 times. It depends. You may have a deadline in front of you that says you guys have got to make a decision by a certain point. That deadline may be, well, if you all don't provide input, then you don't get input. Right? So then someone else is going to make the decision for you. But whatever that is, think about what you want that to look like. Are you willing to have a conversation for a certain length of time, take a break, table it, and come back to it the next time around? Whatever that is, come up with the rules of engagement that work best for your group, for your members. And decide what your non-negotiables are. What are your non-negotiables for your team? Right? Because we really are, we can be defined by the worst behavior we're willing to accept, right? So you're talking about tolerance, you're talking about, acceptance, but the reality is we are defined by the worst behavior we're willing to accept as a group, as an organization, as a community. And so you have to think about what that is. What is that for your group? What is the thing that you're going to say, you know what, this is where we draw the line. We are not going to accept behavior that does not align in these ways. And so those are some things you need to think about when you're thinking about how do you articulate what you want as a leader and creating that inclusivity in that environment. So next on our list is being a role model, right? This is the action portion. And I think often this feels easy sometimes for people who do service, because I see those people who really dive into service as essentially being what I would call a doer. Like, you want to do the work, you want to get it done, you want to go in, you want to help people. And so I want to challenge you all as doers to think about how you can be vulnerable as a leader. So one of the ways that we model empathy and we model understanding is that we are willing to show people that we don't have all the answers, that sometimes things are challenging and difficult for us, that we are willing to step aside and allow another person who may have a different idea or a different way of doing things lead that meeting, lead that moment. That's incredibly important as a leader. And it doesn't make you disqualified for what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you are incapable of being a great leader. It's just allowing the people that you are leading to have a moment to understand that you are to a person and that you have vulnerabilities as well. Also, utilizing those peer influencers or internal leaders. I think every group, every organization, every key club, I think you all could probably identify at least one person that may not be someone who necessarily steps up in a very visible way as a leader, but they have influence among the people in your community, in your club. And so I want you all to take a moment to just write the first name, I don't need last names, the first name of someone that you can think of right now who leads your club internally. So may not necessarily step up as that in-your-face leader or very visible leader, but absolutely is an influencer within the community that you guys have created. Awesome. I see some names coming in. I love it. Fantastic. So as you all are continuing to put those names um, into the chat, that's just a reminder to you to utilize those people, right? Like have those conversations, utilize those people to make change in your organization. Um, Pull them aside and have a conversation about how you're really trying to make an effort to create an environment that is more inclusive. Maybe that person is someone who can help you gently kind of call people out on behavior or ideas or words that you know are inappropriate or that you all are not going to tolerate because it is a non-negotiable for your organization. And then I really want you to think about meetings. So when you think about the way you set up a meeting, the way your meeting is run, the time of your meeting, the day of your meeting, are we creating some of those structural things that just exist that really are inclusive to other people? Again, you are a worldwide organization. You exist around the world in myriad time zones and myriad countries. So are we in a position where I will say this personally, like, right? So as a person who speaks English as my primary language, who is based in the United States of America. I happen to be based in the same place that Key Club International in Kiwanis is based as well. I've got a fair amount of what I would consider to be privilege and power. So am I willing to be a little uncomfortable with the timing of a meeting or the day of a meeting so that those people who are not generally in those positions of privilege or power can be more comfortable, right? So can you think about it in that perspective? Can you again think about this idea of not always being the expert in the room? And that doesn't mean that you're not facilitating a meeting or you're not moving it along, but sometimes if you just allow a topic to be out there and you specifically look to the people around you and you say, you know what, I haven't heard from fill in the blank person. And I know that there's someone who's really passionate about this topic. And so I want to ask them ahead of time before we go into this meeting. I'm going to say, you know what, I know you're super passionate about this. And I know you're not someone who's incredibly vocal during meetings, but I really want you to be able to speak to some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Right. So it's allowing the people whose voices are not necessarily always heard be heard. And that doesn't mean calling them out in the meeting without giving them some warning. I think it's incredibly important to make sure that we are having a conversation with them beforehand. We don't want to put people on the spot, but I also think it's important to give them an opportunity to share their voice as well. The other thing is to think about what we call a bell ringer. So this is a person that as a group, you all decide that once you've decided on those rules of engagement, so if maybe one of your rules of engagement is that you're not going to interrupt each other. You're just not. And that can be hard to do when you're on a digital platform, but you're not going to do it. Then your bell ringer is the person in your meeting who says, oh, I'm so sorry, Stacie. You just interrupted Burton. And so I'm going to ask you to stop and allow Burton to finish speaking, right? They're essentially the enforcer. They're ringing the bell to say, we came up with these rules because we wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to be heard in a meaningful way, to be authentic. And so you're agreeing that this person is going to be able to ring that bell to remind everyone that these are the rules that we have. And then the other part of role modeling is developing others. And so it's utilizing those peer influencers, utilizing those internal leaders, utilizing those people that you know are passionate about things and helping to build them up so that they are where you are or they are where you want to be, right? And so taking all of that information and the confidence and the things that you've learned in the drive and helping instill that into somebody else. All right, our third kind of to do when we're thinking about being inclusive leaders is to assess. And that's feedback, right? Is this working? Are our rules of engagement working? When we talk about our non-negotiables, were those reasonable? Did that make sense for us? Or do we need to readjust what some of those look like based on the way that that's playing out today? It's being willing to have a fluid process, to know that nothing is going to necessarily be set in stone, and to know that you guys have an opportunity to make some changes along the way. So you want to get that feedback. You want it to be oral for people who want to talk. So that may be collecting videos of people if you want that to be the case, or voice memos. You want it to be written for people who are just more likely to write things and feel better with that way of communication. It can be formal or informal. So you can send out surveys to make it a very formal way of gathering feedback. You can use something as informal as Jamboard, which is a Google app that allows you to kind of throw something up. It's like a bulletin board. It's a digital bulletin board. So you could have a weekly topic that you throw out there, and everyone has the ability to sort of create a post-it note and post on that bulletin board, whether they can attribute their name to it or not, right? So I think that that's one of the things that I really love about it too, is that if someone wants to be anonymous, they can absolutely be anonymous. If someone wants to attribute themselves to their comment, they can attribute themselves to the comment. And then all you have to do is count, right? So if you know you were looking for 35 responses, when you get to 35, you know that you've heard from everyone. So just one of those things to put out there as well, as an opportunity. But knowing that you want to utilize video and audio appropriately, that you want to utilize services and platforms and software that allow for subtitling as necessarily as you need to. I'm a person who likes to watch everything with subtitling. So sometimes even doing a Zoom meeting is hard for me because I know that I speak quickly, even though I can speak clearly, and that sometimes that can be really difficult for people to understand. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to reinforce. So you're going to sort of do the first 3 steps all over again, but you're going to do more. So maybe you want to incorporate this thought process into your activities and into more of your meetings. Maybe you want to think about creating a book club. It doesn't have to be a book. It could be articles. Maybe you want to think about creating language specifically in position descriptions, or rethinking who you partner or co-sponsor events with, or rethinking your service projects and the places that you are doing those. Are all of those things aligned with your values, with what you are doing to create an inclusive environment? And if they're not, maybe it's time to rethink whether or not you want to continue to co-sponsor, partner, or provide service to those organizations or opportunities. Okay, so we are running out of time. So I'm gonna put this discussion question out there, and you guys can put it in the chat so you can start. So what is one thing that you think of as we looked through those lists of 4 main objects, more opportunities really, 4 opportunities, and some of the different things you could do that you think you could implement next month? And what are some things that you would want to implement as the rest of your tenure in your leadership position progressed, or the rest of the Key Club year progresses? So if you guys could put that in the chat, that would be great. So something you're going to do in the next month and something you want to do by July. Okay, so we are going to, we're going to talk a little bit about another one of the statements you all have, that we promote caring as a way of life. So I want to acknowledge that we are living in probably some of the most challenging times, and in some ways, some of the most hopeful times. And I say that because I don't know that I have seen a time where I feel like the world has been as united as it has been in many of the different aspects of social justice issues that we have come against. But on the other hand, it's also been really hard, right? Hundreds of thousands of people are dying from a virus that many countries cannot get a handle on. Some of that is due to sort of this very sort of selfish self-actualization that people have. And we're all suffering from that. We're all living through that. And doing that while being students, I'm sure many of you also have jobs and you're working. You may also have family responsibilities or responsibilities to other loved ones and people you care about. And you're doing this. And I have to imagine that this is one of the many co-curricular activities that you have, that this is not the only one. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I want to take a couple minutes to talk about how you can care for yourself and how you can support each other in these moments. So you all very clearly say, right, we promote caring as a way of life. So I want you to care for yourselves too. And so I think it's really interesting, right? So caring is feeling or showing concern for or kindness to others. And I use this picture because something that my family does when we know that a person is going through a really hard time, whether it's because of work, whether it's school, or and just any other thing that's happening, whether we're just having a really high anxiety week or month or year or 7 months, is we always ask each other this question: have you been fed and watered? And it's just like our funny way of essentially being like, are you taking care of yourself today? And so this concept of taking care of yourself and have you been fed and watered, which is interesting because it's really like the baseline in life, right? Like, have you eaten and had a little bit of water today? But it's our way of reminding ourselves to do that. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what I would call planned care and what I would call everyday care. And so planned care. And so for me, I think planned care is essentially something you're going to set out and plan to do, right? And so I see this really great comment that someone says that people really need more social interaction right now in quarantine. So reaching out to offer them virtual ways to connect is super important. And I agree, absolutely, every time. So you'll see that we're going to talk about planned care. And planned care is like a day of nothing, right? So you say, I'm going to do nothing today, or maybe it's a couple of hours that you can devote to that. But that means you're going to like D&D your phone. You're going to do not disturb your phone and your email. Like I want you to do both. Not just the notifications on your phone, but like, don't let your email suck you in. Don't let the other things that could be happening suck you in, but give yourself a couple of hours to just be you and to not have to be you in conjunction with anything else. Or you can do a day of something that's not Key Club, that's not school or work or social justice related. So maybe that's baking for you, or maybe you're someone who likes to run if you live in a place and are a person who running can be a hobby. Whatever that is the something for you, pick a day where you do that something that fills your cup, that is not specific to somebody else, but that's really about you. And sometimes it's just as easy as like making that doctor's appointment that you probably were supposed to have in like March or April or May, and you just haven't rescheduled yet, right? Like, because I can tell you that I've been in that position too, where, all of those things got canceled, and maybe we haven't done that yet. So maybe take a minute to do that for yourself, to plan that. And schedule those coffee, tea, water, soda dates that you may want to have with people. Not just a random FaceTime, although those are amazing ways to keep in contact with people and to keep in touch. But just because we're socially distant doesn't mean we're not social, right? It doesn't mean that we don't want to have those interactions, but plan them. Make a point to say, I'm going to block this time so that I can be present on this FaceTime or this Zoom call or this WhatsApp or this Marco Polo or whatever it is you're using, so that I'm not going to be disturbed by other things, and I'm going to not be distracted by other things, but I'm going to be like the two of us would be sitting someplace together where we wouldn't be necessarily looking at our phones, but we would be having that conversation and talking. I would also say alternatively, set up what I like to call Zoom homework dates, where you just choose to be on a call together, whatever it is you're doing, and like, you play what I like to call music roulette. So each of you plays 3 songs. Like you have to pick 3 songs. One person gets to play 3 songs and the next person gets to play 3 songs. And you sit and you just do your homework together. So again, trying to simulate that, that environment that you would maybe naturally be in with your friends, right? Like if you were going to be able to hang out together and just do homework and chill the way that you would normally, like same thing. You can do something very similar like that, but plan it and try to make sure that you guys stick to that plan. And then let's talk a little bit about everyday care. So it's this idea of mindfulness. So I think mindfulness is a really lofty term, and sometimes I feel like I'm really good at it, sometimes I'm not. But for me, mindfulness is really just trying to be present in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So taking a moment to be present, taking a moment to not be distracted by the other things that are going on in your life. And maybe that means you take a social media break, right? And that could be just for an hour, 2 hours, a whole day, 30 minutes. I don't know your social media preferences, but sometimes you just have to take a break from all of that. Sometimes it's about putting your hand on your stomach and letting yourself breathe and feeling your hand go up and down, right? Just really being connected to your body in that moment. Those are things you can do every day. I have created what I call small physical reassurance. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my favorite things to teach, and that is to come up with something that you can do that grounds you, that brings you back to where you are. So if you're starting to feel anxious, if you're starting to feel like all of the things on your plate are more than you can handle, what can you do? And for me, I take the thumb of my right hand and I put my thumbnail and I just touch the inside sort of the tip of my index finger. And it's something I can do in public and people rarely see it or even acknowledge that I'm doing it. But it's something that I have taught myself to do so that when I am feeling overwhelmed, when I am feeling discouraged, when I cried in my car because I just needed to have a cry, right? I just took a moment to do that, to push my thumbnail, not hard. I'm not trying to hurt myself, but just as a reminder of like, you know who you are, you know what you're doing, take a moment and then move on. And then give yourself some room to breathe and write a handwritten letter. I don't know when the last time you all wrote a handwritten thank you was, but like, I think it's really great to get actual mail that's not like solicitations for things. I don't know about you all, but in the United States, we're about to be in that world of like election. So I get tons of election mail. And so sometimes it's just nice to get something and it can be a surprise. So for me, I tend to be someone who on my calendar, I like will just put a couple of friends' names at the beginning of a week. And I know that by the end of that week, my goal is to just write each of them a handwritten note and pop it in the mail. And usually what I use to do that, which I know is sort of hypocritical because it's not handwritten, is an app called TouchNote. And so TouchNote is really great. You can create postcards and note cards and birthday cards and all kinds of things. And so I use TouchNote all the time, and you can upload pictures from your phone to it, and that is how I try to send to my friends a little bit of a hello. And then the last thing to do that I think about for everyday care is what I call well wishes. And so this takes a little bit of planning, but it's a way for you all to sort of create a tree. So back in the olden times, when we had like landlines, people had trees and you would just call people. And so create that interaction in that phone tree for each other so that you are checking in on each other, or someone is being checked in with at least every single day. And so we'll skip the discussion part. But so that for me is kind of going to wrap everything up. I know I'm over time and I'm sorry, Greg. But I want you all to remember that your voice is always greater. It's always more powerful than your insecurity at any given moment. So take the opportunity to utilize the steps that have been given to you. Take some time to think through what you are going to do in the next month. Take some time to plan with the people who help support you what you want to do by July. And start small, implement one thing at a time, but know that every single step that you take will be closer and closer to creating that inclusive environment that you all want to create. So I appreciate your time and your energy today. I have been so impressed with your comments and your ability to communicate through the chat. Thank you so much. Hopefully someday we'll get to all see each other in person. And I just want you all to have a great rest of your day or morning or evening, wherever you are. Thanks.
Stacie, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. I know I learned so much that I'll be taking back, not only to the international board, but to my everyday life. I can tell from the chat that everybody else feels the same way. So we just appreciate you being here. Everybody, that wraps up the Global Engagement Rally. Thank you so much for coming today. Take all these notes that you've learned and incorporate them in your life however you can. Keep serving, take care of yourselves, stay safe. Good to see you all. Thank you again, Stacie.